Hello and welcome, everybody. We're excited to have you join us for this webinar. While people are coming in, we'll just cover a little bit of the logistics. So at the bottom of the screen, for any of those who aren't familiar with Zoom, which probably is the minority nowadays, there's the Q&A box down there that you can use to ask questions. There's also a chat feature, so if you want to put your name in there, say hello, say where you're calling in from, we'd be glad to get communications going there. We have a jam-packed session today, so I think we're going to be jumping right into it and getting started. So again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. Very excited about this session that we have planned. We're going to be discussing government innovation and modernization with our panel. But before we begin, I'd like our panel to introduce themselves. So I'll ask them each to come off mute, and we'll start with Dwayne.
So I'm Dwayne Gordon, former First Deputy Chief Admin Officer for the City of Philadelphia. In a past life, I worked with Stephanie and Jeanette and Eliza on a lot of different projects that span across the enterprise or work with certain departments. And so I've transitioned into entrepreneurship where I'm still in the transformation space, but I'm more so helping people with their personal finances, just helping them transform and just understand their patterns and their programming.
Excellent. Eliza, you want to introduce yourself
Sure.
next? Awesome.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Eliza Erickson. I am currently the Director of Permit License and Certification, so PLC Innovation, in the Office of Transformation and Opportunity in the Office of Governor Josh Shapiro. So a really long made-up title that basically means I spend a lot of my time working with state-level agencies to help them really uncover and then solve pains and challenges in how we are processing permits. I would say with an emphasis on kind of really large, really impactful, really complicated economic development focused permits. Like Dwayne said, in a past life, actually, four of us worked together at the City of Philadelphia, where I really kind of curated a portfolio around public sector innovation and thinking about how do you create infrastructure and systems where government employees can think differently about how we solve challenges, how we deliver services, really just kind of how we build things better for the people that we serve in the public sector.
Fantastic. Matt, you want to give a quick little intro?
Hey, thanks. Hey, I'm Matt Dobson. I'm living and working in Louisville, Kentucky. Currently, I'm a product manager at Skylight. In the not too distant past, I was at the GSA and part of Technology Transformation Services, first at 18F, and then more recently leading up a portfolio at 10X, which is an internal venture fund investing in new ideas from federal employees. Excited to be here. Thank you all.
Thanks, Matt. Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Tipton. I am currently the Deputy Chief Operating Officer in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, which is a collar county to the Philadelphia region and city. Here as a Deputy COO, my portfolio encompasses, all of our internal facing operations. What I like to say, these are the departments that help every other county department fulfill their mission. So things like IT and procurement. Prior to my role here with Montgomery County, I spent nearly 20 years working for the city of Philadelphia. Most recently, in that time with the city, I was the Philadelphia's chief administrative officer. I got to work with many of the lovely people on this panel as the CAO, and really working, at a very basic level to help government operate more simply and openly and in ways that, generally improve people's everyday experiences and how they're interfacing with government. And, supporting again these amazing departments that help other city departments fulfill their missions, IT, HR, purchasing. So I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Jeanette.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My
Hmm.
name is Jeanette Bruno. I am the Director of Customer Advocacy for Sovra, where I'm really focused on building communities of procurement practitioners that we serve here at Sovra across North America, so US and Canada. Like Matt, in the not too distant past, I was the first Director of Change Management at the VA's Office of the Chief Technology Officer, where I managed a large-scale enterprise-wide change on behalf of the VA to better digital services and experiences for America's veterans. I also had the privilege of working with Matt at GSA's transformation, TTS Technology Transformation Services, where I did a lot of change management, organizational design, and development work. And then, of course, with all of my former Philadelphia colleagues working in change management at the city.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, let's jump into the panel. So I guess our first question will be for Stephanie. What operational or technological shifts have made the biggest difference in citizen perception of government this year?
So I think for me in my career working in local government, the biggest shift I've seen, and I think you're seeing this more significantly really over the last, I would say, 5+ years, has been in moving from technology-centered design to more human-centered design. And what I mean by that is I see governments at all levels really prioritizing resident experience. And it's not to say that that wasn't a priority before, but it's becoming more of the focal point when we're looking at technology and operational changes. We're really thinking about how is the resident interfacing or experiencing government. And so focusing on those high touch, sort of high impact services. I think you saw this, especially in the Biden administration. You've seen this, in certainly in city government, state government, where we're looking at those services and making them more simpler, more accessible, and more intuitive. Obviously, part of that shift, and I think we're seeing that more and more recently, is how do we leverage, AI as part of that experience for residents. But I think transparency and ease of access are, becoming much more of a focal point, just as much as the underlying tech that's sort of underpinning what we're doing. And I think we're seeing the biggest improvements for agencies are pairing, modern tools with clearer communication, more streamlined process, and service delivery that is, really reflecting how people are actually living their lives or, the experiences they're having. So, I wouldn't say that is uh, necessarily a new trend, something that's happening this year, but I think it is something that is changing how citizens and residents are engaging with their government in a way that is hopefully shifting their perception of what we're doing.
Excellent. Jeanette, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would just amplify everything Stephanie shared. I'll kind of, maybe double down a little bit on this perception that I feel like at least we definitely worked on quite a lot at the VA was in centering veterans and what we're doing. We're sort of asking, like, where is it that folks want us to meet them? Like government going out to meet people, really that human-centered concept. And so I sort of think about it like how we approach the process of building the VA's like first mobile app for people to manage their healthcare and benefits. It's like health in their pocket, the VA in their pocket. And I think it's sort of that like going to the people rather than having people come to you, being really responsive to the ways in which, I can check my bank online, I can call an Uber from my phone, like I can I'm engaging in these other services in that way, it's government's, it's the onus of government to be imaginative and innovative and how they want to think about service delivery really differently, and how different teams within government need to think about how they have to work together differently to enable those services. So again, at the VA, massive organization, over 490,000 employees across the US and territories, and even in the Philippines, different functions that maybe never worked together had to work together very closely to be able to deliver this one seamless experience for every veteran who chose to use it, because it's about what people are choosing to participate in.
I'm curious, like, has there been an increase in kind of the self-serve opportunities? And if so, like, how have you gone about kind of identifying what areas to, build out self-serve for citizens? Sorry, I know that was a bit of a curveball. It wasn't part of the question, but
Sure, no. I mean, I can take
yeah.
that. I mean, I think the theme that Jeanette drew out there is certainly the trend that we're seeing. Yes,
Yeah.
there are a move towards more self-service options, right? I think most people are very much accustomed to doing most things on their phone. They
Hmm.
can do things pretty seamlessly, and with pretty efficient responses, right? And government also needs to move in that direction as well. So anything from getting a permit to paying a fee, all of that, I think for government, we're looking at the places where, and this is how we make the prioritization is where are residents interfacing with us the most. We do that by looking at, what are some of the things that are happening on our website and drawing out from there, like, is there a way for us to make this a better self-service option?
Hmm.
And again, it's around making it accessible and easy for residents to find that entry point and do what they need to do, and do it with the same ease and expediency as they can, calling an Uber,
Yeah.
to Jeanette's example.
Excellent. We'll move on to question two, and Stephanie, don't go far because this you're going to kick us off again here. But how can departments like procurement evolve to be a catalyst for this kind of operational change?
So thanks. I love talking about procurement. It's kind of a jam. But I think when we're talking about procurement, modernization in the public sector, especially, I always say that I think it's much more than tools. It's really about, reshaping how we create value and serve the public. So, what I mean by that is, for I think a long time, and this is still the case in many places, including where I am now, sometimes, procurement sometimes has been centered more on process compliance, and making sure every box is checked and ticked, and that is an important and role that they have to serve. And I think modernization doesn't abandon that integrity, but it adds kind of like, I think, a more strategic layer to that. So shifting from just like, did we follow the steps and did we check all the boxes, to are we achieving the best outcome, and really looking at procurement and shifting it to like, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and are we getting to that outcome that we expect to see through this procurement? And I think that is a shift, right?
Mhm.
For a lot of organizations, especially in the government sector, where we are heavily regulated, a lot of layers of requirements that are placed on top of our procurement processes. So sometimes it's hard um, to get to that place. But part of the way that we get there is thinking about more flexible procurement methods or clearer guidance, and really empowering our teams to do that type of strategic work. I think the second piece um, is really digital and technology. Technology should really be used to simplify procurement, and not reinforce outdated workflows. I've seen that happen with procurement modernization. We're, bringing on a new system, but all we're doing is feeding into it, old processes and workflows. So it really means, modernization, I think, means having more integrated and data-driven systems that can give us visibility into what we're doing, our risk, our contract performance, and hopefully, reduce the administrative burden on staff, which I think is a big impediment to procurement sometimes being a catalyst for that operational change. Staff are very much bogged down by sort of those tactical, technical things that they have to do, and can't focus as much on strategy. And this is where, not to tease maybe a future conversation today, but where I do think AI has tremendous potential, right? Like in procurement, hands down. And then the last thing I would say is I think we have to broaden who can do business with government. So, modern procurement or modern procurement organizations should make it easier for small, local, diverse suppliers to participate in the process. So, we did a lot of this work, when I was in Philly. So making our solicitation simpler, focusing more on outcome-based requirements and not, all these little, boxes that a supplier has to check. And more innovation friendly models, which can sometimes be really hard to do in government because of all the regulations. So I think when we get this right, cycle times get better, outcomes hopefully improve. And I think suppliers see government as a more predictable partner. And we can get better, hopefully better insights, real-time insights into what we're doing, especially when you have a good, technology underpinning the work that you're doing. So yeah.
Excellent. Love that.
Yeah.
That was great. Liza, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, maybe on top of or next to kind of what Stephanie said, is I think based on all that information, like innovation and transformation in a space like procurement is really hard because of all the things that Stephanie said. Like it is really heavily regulated. People are really overburdened. It is this like incredibly process heavy, detailed, A happens, then B happens, then C happens, like forever. And so I think there's also a really interesting shift of if and when you can innovate in a department like procurement or in a process like procurement, the message that that sends to the rest of government, to the rest of agencies is like, well, damn, like if procurement can do it, like we're not as hard as procurement, like we can do it also. And I think that's a really impactful anecdote to have both internally when you're trying to kind of evangelize innovation and transformation in other spaces, and to some of what Stephanie said, externally, is I think when stakeholders see that a government agency is investing in procurement transformation, it's a little bit of like, oh, these guys are serious about changing and fixing the way that we operate. And I think that kind of holistically, it's almost the opposite of like starting with low hanging fruit. It's like procurement reform is super high hanging fruit. And if you can make inroads in that space, I think you can make inroads in a lot of other places inside the public sector.
Excellent. So we're going to move on, and Dwayne, I'm going to throw this one over to you to start us off. In your experience, what is the biggest modernization or innovation challenge? Legacy systems, budget, workforce skills, or leadership inertia? Or if you want to throw your own out there, feel free to do so.
I would say, to piggyback on what Stephanie and Eliza were talking about, is that these are all great things, in the procurement space or just any department, but none of that moves unless you have, great solid leadership in place, right? And so I've seen over the years where leadership inertia has been, a key inhibitor as far as projects moving forward, innovation happening, and so forth. And so when you think about leadership, inertia, it comes down to risk aversion, right? I've always said, transformation is a big thing to undertake for a leader. And if you've never done that before, that can be sort of intimidating. And so no one really wants to be the throat to choke, right? In situations like that. And so I think it comes down to do you have the right leadership in place? Do they have the right vision? And then it comes down beyond that to do you have the right people in place? I think if you have those things stacked up, I think it makes the project and the process go a lot smoother.
Excellent. Matt, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think this question that I don't think it's necessarily pulling those things apart, but thinking about how they work together, and it's a bit of a vicious cycle. I think you're going to have leadership shifts in any large organization, private or public, but it's baked into public work that there's going to be an election cycle and new administration changes, and even if you maintain an incumbent, they're still going to be looking for work that shows up at a certain period of time, which reinforces like developing a new razzle dazzle project and not thinking about these things as like long-term products that take continued investment. And then we reinforce that with budgeting, making a distinction between new software or new tools that get that sort of funding and then things that are under operations and maintenance that then take a different skill set, which then feeds into the labor piece. So a bit of a systems view of like how these things fit together. And I'm not sure at which point you plug in to fix it, but I don't think you can necessarily pull them apart.
Absolutely. That's fair. Is there any other views from the panel any other perspectives you want to share? If not, we can move on. So, Eliza, I'm going to come back to you with this one. What lessons have you learned from initiatives that have failed or stalled? And part two to this, what makes for an initiative that sticks?
Sure. I love this question, and I kept my mouth shut on the previous question because I had a feeling this one was coming, and I think they're really related. So I think very related to what Matt was saying, I think from my perspective, there's kind of three things that need to happen in order to create a successful or a sustainable innovation or transformation. I think first, you definitely do need to have leadership buy-in. I think a lot of this work really relies on and is dependent in having folks in high-level positions that are willing to kind of champion this work, champion this way of thinking. I think even when we're thinking about risk aversion, having a leader that's willing to absorb some of that risk and kind of take the burden off of maybe lower level frontline employees that are really going to be kind of doing the change. I think that's a really important component. I would say, but leadership buy-in and kind of strong leadership is nothing without on the ground support. And I think what we see a lot in government is you get a charismatic leader that comes in with the best of intentions and is like, I'm ready to make this agency innovative. We're going to do things differently. But the mechanisms of what that actually looks like is either never like communicated properly down the chain, or the folks on the front lines are never really bought into what that change or innovation looks like. I think something that I focus on a lot in my work is creating a really strong innovation foundation. So how do you leverage your frontline workers? I sit in the permit reform space now. So how are you making sure that if you want to reform a permit process, it's your permit reviewers that are really the ones kind of proposing the change and being a part of, bringing that forward and the implementation strategy. So I think there's top-down leadership buy-in, there's bottom-up kind of stakeholder engagement and buy-in. And then I think thirdly, and I'm keeping an eye on the chat too, and I feel like maybe this kind of touches a little bit on some of those comments, is I think more often than not, government is actually not very good at solving the right challenge and the right problem in the right way. So like you see a bright, shiny thing and you're like, that's what we need. That's going to fix X, Y, and Z. but X, Y, and Z is not actually what your issue is. And so now you've like bought the new tech or you've bought the new widget and you're just overlaying it on top of a broken system, a broken process, a broken culture. And so I think really making sure that when we are implementing transformation and innovation initiatives, whether they have a tech component or not, like really doing the work to understand the problem that you're trying to solve and making sure that your solution really solves the thing that is broken. And so when those kind of three components are in place, I think that from my perspective is really what ends up distinguishing an initiative that's going to last and is going to have buy-in and is going to be sustainable versus one that maybe is out with a new administration or, ends up sitting on a shelf because, one of those kind of prongs was never put properly in place.
Excellent. Stephanie, anything to add?
I would just co-sign all that Eliza just said. I think, we have certainly collectively, probably amongst the panel, have seen, a number of really well-intentioned and, most people would seem like really great ideas that just have completely failed. And I think the people and what Eliza highlighted is incredibly important. I think sometimes we underestimate the change that people are going to have to absorb, especially when they're balancing enormous workloads. So anything can feel like something is being done to them rather than built with them. And, I think Eliza is just, expert at really thinking about how to bring in staff to, make sure that that's happening at both, top down, bottom up. The other thing that I just want to also highlight is I think we lose momentum sometimes when ownership is unclear. In my experience with some larger IT projects or modernization efforts, like if it's not explicit, like who's making decisions, who's, accountable to certain things, who's responsible for doing, change management, whatever it is, you need to make sure that there's champions at every level and not just an executive sponsor. Just in my experiences, when that's a little murky, a little bit more murky, the projects have tended to not do great. And just, I think having part of that is just having like very clear, tangible, like early wins, especially in the public sector, sometimes these large projects feel like they go on forever. And people can lose sight of why we started. They can lose sight of why we're doing it. And so I think having like very clear, tangible wins along the way, especially trying to solve, real problems quickly, trust sometimes will start to erode, and people will feel less engaged in the project.
Excellent. It kind of reminds me, the answers here remind me of the classic quote of, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend the first four sharpening the axe. Because I think that really is, what drives home the point here. So, Matt, Dwayne, Jeanette, anything to add?
Yeah, one of the things I will add to this is that I think government has to do a better job of changing. And that's kind of a broad statement, but when you think about innovation, transformation, modernization, government doesn't do a good job as far as reimagining operations, right? How are we operating and delivering services, and how are we operating internally? And do we have the right structure? Do we have the right people, right? So when we look at, say, for instance, transformation, we know that change management is a huge component of that, right? But do most
Mhm.
governments have a change management team? No, right? So we can hire a person, but when we think about just any transformation project, that is a huge undertaking, especially just for one person. So we have to just do a better job as far as visioning what is it that we are trying to accomplish, right? And so I think part of this whole process is, having visioning sessions with leadership, with staff, with whomever, so that that full vision is realized, and then we can start working through the process from there, right? But I think that just reimagining how government is structured internally is gonna make a huge difference.
All right, we'll move on to next question. And Dwayne, we're coming right back to you with this one. So um, we've already teased it a bit. I mean, you can't really have a webinar these days without talking about AI. So curious to see, where do you believe AI is providing value to government operations, and where does the hype outweigh the reality?
Yeah. So I think with AI, um, I think that the hype around it is making the most noise right now, right? And so it tends to be confusing, it tends to be scary for a lot of people, but the real value that you're seeing, with AI is in document processing, permit reviews, citizen inquiries, predictive maintenance on infrastructure. You see that more so in foreign countries than you see it in this country for the most part. So anywhere that there's like a high volume of work that needs to be processed, you'll see it there, right? But where I think it's being hyped or overly hyped is where people or officials in government thinking that AI can make complex decisions, and that's not a reality right now, right? Replacing human judgment, right? So we know that a lot of instances of government work is very nuanced. And so AI is not equipped for that, especially like even if you say, okay, we're going to feed it our internal data. Well, how is this data even structured? Right. And so, bad in, bad out. Right. And so I think that, government has to level set of where the value is or where it could be derived versus thinking that AI is coming for everything. Right. We're far away from that.
Excellent. Matt, anything to add?
Hey, thanks. I think Dwayne hit a lot of the things around the head that to talk about. I think some things I've seen that are exciting are the sense making of comments and public feedback, and really trying to find ways to bring large groups of people into conversations. There's a really cool project that happened in Bowling Green, Kentucky, imagining a future state of that city that's really growing, and thinking about how to make sense of again public comment. I think there's some of the really mundane applications are actually exciting in the amount of time that they can say. You have, freedom of information requests or other open data requests to be able to automatically redact PII to save all kinds of hours and time in doing that sort of tedious labor, frees time to do other things. I think that's really exciting, and agreed on all of the things that it's not quite ready for prime time with as well. From a software development perspective, new innovative tools perspective, exciting to see how quickly you can spin up new ideas and test them with real
Mhm.
people to get that feedback too. But yeah, I don't think that it's running government yet. I do one good bit of colors. Louisville, I just went to a presentation from our CIO talking about the tension between information retention policies and data, or like giving access to that data and having a tool that because information's been saved for so long, it can't tell you who the current mayor is. So it needs to be able to go back and control and say, this information is fresh, this information is useful, and these are things we're holding on to because policy says so. So I think there's just a little funny anecdote on that. But yeah, thank you.
Very interesting. Stephanie, do you want to chime in with anything?
I mean, I
Yeah.
think these guys really hit on the high notes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think, anything
Yeah.
that's really like a repetitive task,
Hmm.
workflow automations, I think that's where um, you know, AI has the most potential. And, you know, thank thankfully for us, government has lots of those things. So there's lots of opportunity, I think. But yeah, that you still have to have the human in there making sure and validating what's happening.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, and Stephanie, we'll stick with you on this one, continue the AI conversation. But what areas of government do you believe could benefit most from AI or other emerging technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I highlighted this in my earlier response, but I really do believe there's a lot of opportunity with procurement, and mainly on, helping to alleviate staff with some of the more, rote or regular tasks that they might be doing. Validating responses, looking at costs, benefits, comparing responses or bids. Processing a purchase order, what have you. I think,
Mhm.
where there are resource intensive areas where there's high volumes of paperwork, or compliance tasks, I think, AI is very good at looking at data and making, sort of seeing patterns and helping you identify those things. And so I think to the extent that AI can really help reduce that administrative burden for staff and even improve accuracy in some ways, it allows, this is not about replacing people. This
Yeah.
is about freeing staff up to, focus more of their time on, more strategic level work. I also think there's a place for, for some of the same reasons in human services. On the back end of the direct service delivery, there is a lot of paperwork and case management, and compliance, right? So again, if there's a way that we can free staff up to provide more of that direct service, I think when it's done responsibly, it can help agencies, not only move faster and be more expeditious, but, really focus on, what matters most in government, which is serving people.
Mhm.
And that's where, those are the two spaces where I think there's a lot of opportunity. And, certainly in Montgomery County, as we're looking at how we're deploying and vetting, new technology, in AI, those are certainly some of the areas that we're, looking at, more directly.
Excellent. Jeanette, anything to add? I mean, that was a pretty
Yeah, I mean,
comprehensive answer.
it was a really fantastic answer. I think, like to Stephanie's point, anything that's heavy on compliance and anything that's really heavy
Mhm.
on data. Like, and again, I saw somebody wrote in the chat, like, I am a human in the loop forever. I am actually very distrusting generally of AI in my personal life. But I think that it can bring a lot of value to streamline. It can bring a lot of value for higher value human work. And I think like we are going to need to really define
Mhm.
what that means in a world where AI can do a lot of those repetitive tasks, and we are just kind of providing that vetting and making sure it's referenced to the right policy and not the policy of my neighboring county. But I think it's actually it's gonna, I think, enable some of the transformation that Stephanie and Eliza talked about before of like how might, I'd like to ask the question, like how might procurement look different when we don't have to do the intensity of everything that we have to do. Like it allows us to imagine, I think, a very different way of approaching those kind of backbone operations of city government. And I actually think that's really exciting.
So moving on, many industries are facing what has been coined as a silver tsunami, and I think government is no different. So Eliza, I think this one's for you, and I'd love to get your thoughts on how you are attracting and retaining the next generation of government leaders, and especially what's being done to kind of attract that Gen Z talent.
Sure. This is like my favorite topic known to man. Um, I I mean, I've like built a career working in the public sector. I think everyone should come work in the public sector. I think it's like the greatest thing I've ever done. Um, so, but I think like that being said, when I was graduating grad school, like, working for government was not on my radar screen. Like it didn't feel exciting. It didn't feel It didn't feel like it was operating in a way that I wanted to operate. It didn't feel like it was solving the challenges that I wanted to solve. And I truly think that it was because I didn't understand what government did, because government didn't make itself relevant to my life. And government wasn't out there, I think, shaping a narrative around what the public sector is, what the public sector does, like really the role that it plays in society in a way that I won't even say in a way that resonated with me. I think in a way that was out there at all. And I think government traditionally is not great at telling its story, telling like what we're doing well, what we're doing that's cool. And I think part of how you attract, entertain, especially the next generation of leaders is, you know, you to kind of what Jeanette was saying earlier, like you meet people where they are, you make yourself seem relevant. You know, you meet the people on the street and are very clear about like, here's what government is doing and here's how we're doing it. I have a lot of conversations with folks that are considering careers in government now, and what I tell them on a foundational level is like any challenge, any topic that you want to work on, government is working on it. And I think like the conversation about AI is really interesting because like we're seeing like the same technological innovations and evolutions that are happening in all these other sectors are also happening in government. So like you want to work on AI, you want to be a software developer, you want to be a product manager, like we need those people also, and those roles exist and like all the things. And so I think part of it is government needs to just be better about kind of putting itself out there. I think the retention is kind of obviously the other half of that coin. I think on a really like basic level, it's like it's the same things that other workplaces struggle with. Like, what is your professional development ecosystem? How are you supporting younger workers? Things like parental leave and flexible work policies, like, you know, these things that kind of like become the norm in maybe some other sectors. Like, how is government also getting to that level? I think one of the things I've started to appreciate is, especially when it comes to tech roles, I think that there is like starting to be an understanding, and I'm painting with a very broad brush here, that's like, you know, if you want tech talent, tech people, perhaps differently from some other government roles, like don't necessarily need to be physically based in a specific office or in a specific location. And I've seen a lot of flexibility kind of in tech hiring, which I would love to see, you know, kind of continuing to move out into other government roles. But I think a lot of it just comes down to like this narrative around government is not full of, you know, there are some true bureaucrats that are like, I love red tape, I love fax machines, I love pencils. Like, I've met them, they are there. But I think really government is full of people that are incredibly passionate, incredibly skilled, really love what they're doing, that want to give back to their communities in these like very real ways. And we need to be like putting that out there and really using it as a tool.
Love that.
I get very passionate about this.
Yes, I love the passion. Stephanie, you want to add
No,
anything?
I mean,
Yeah.
listen, Eliza is the ultimate um, government public sector evangelist. So it's hard, it's a hard act to follow.
It is. Yeah.
But I think for Gen Z, you know, they want a mission and mission like match purpose, right? And
Hmm.
that is something that government offers. And to Eliza's point, I think we could really do a much better job in really illuminating the ways and very tangible ways that we're doing that and who the people are that are doing that work. And you know, just you know, completely agree with the need for flexibility. And you know, I think COVID, in some ways, like a lot of workplaces, really forced government to look at its flexible, its workplace policies a little bit different, which was hard for us. But
Mhm.
I am heartened that some of that has continued through, and beyond COVID, where it's the recognition that, we do need to give employees more flexibility around how they define and balance their work and home lives. And, um, I think that just gets to a level of, people want to feel they have autonomy with the work that they're doing. And we do have the ability to do that in government. It's not something that, we can't offer. And
Yeah,
just, yeah.
absolutely. Great. So Jeanette, I'm going to toss this one over to you. What will distinguish the most effective government leaders of the next decade? Decisiveness, adaptability, vision, or something else? And also, what are the traits that will separate resilient agencies from ones that are reactive?
Yeah, I think similar to Eliza's point about absolutely loving her workforce question, I'm jazzed about this question. I've spent a week at a conference kind of talking about and around this topic. I think certainly in the last year, but I would say probably since 2020, we've seen, I think, a scale of change and volatility and just like a deep uncertainty in different areas and different spaces. And I think when you layer AI and some of the vast technological growth that's happened in the last 5 years, like somebody told me today, oh, like ChatGPT, like sort of that, like, agent just talking to an agent, that's like old AI. Now it's agentic AI, where the AI is talking to the AI to do a thing with the other AI, and you're not even there. Like, and that's just shifted in the last probably like six months or so. So I think in light of the fact that we're moving so quickly and we're also moving so uncertainly and so there's so
Mhm.
much volatility, I think adaptability is going to be sort of that like key cornerstone of a leader who's able to truly be flexible and truly pivot and truly just say, you know what, this is our bag today and we're going to kind of go in this direction. And acknowledgement that they may have to adapt from that in a 6 month time frame. So I think like our time frames are going to be shorter and shorter and shorter. I know, like personally, I was just telling someone today, I feel like this year, this time that I've been outside of government feels like it's been years, and it's only been like 7 months for me. So I think being able to be adaptable, and I think like radically adaptable to changing circumstances, and being able to be, I think, confident in just that uncertainty and sort of seeing that uncertainty, recognizing it, knowing it's there, and knowing that, like, you might not be making the right decision at all times, but you've got to have that like ability to pivot. I think it really gets back to that sort of, I saw somebody in the chat, like resiliency, sort of just this ability to be like, you know what? We're going to go in this direction. We're going to see what happens. And then I think that kind of gets to like those traits. For me, I think something that I don't know that we do enough, especially in government, and I can sort of co-sign this because I do have a credential in foresight, is I think kind of planning out these scenarios, planning out even if they're small pieces and asking those like big questions. Well, what if this and what if that? And how would we? And what would we do? And how might we do that? But really pushing out and not just saying, what are we doing today and what will that mean for tomorrow? But like, let's imagine the tomorrow 10 years from now and back into what that looks like today. And so I think like these folks who I think are comfortable navigating uncertainty and also comfortable asking these big questions that can sometimes feel really risky. Like, again, I did this work in government. Matt and I did a training program for feds, worked with auditors. I worked with a lot of folks in sort of the back office functions of government. Like I would ask them to like draw me a little map of things or write me a scenario and like make a movie trailer title. And people would be like, this is crazy. Why are we doing this? But it's that skill of
Mhm.
pushing your imagination a little bit and then coming back and bringing it tangibly to what that means today and how that might affect your decision making. And there are tools and resources that are available to help people do this. But I think it's really going to challenge leaders to push out further so that they can be more proactive and ready for more things than sort of having to constantly be in that responsive mode.
Absolutely. Someone put in the chat here, Aaron, being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think that's a great, yeah. Matt, do you want to add anything to this?
I agree like completely 100% with everything Jeanette said. We've done some of that stuff together. I think that it's being able to go from those future imaginings into small scale
Mhm.
experiments and being able to communicate that with the people that you serve and to know that it means a good investment of the taxpayer dollar more than feeling 100% confident that yes, we're going to arrive in this future space in 10 years and being okay with that. I've seen some of that here locally in Louisville and it's felt really good. That's not always been the way things work. I mean, there or anywhere else, but 100% everything Jeanette said.
So, Liza, if we're here 5 years from now, still talking about modernization and innovation, does that mean that we have failed or evolved?
I definitely don't think it means we failed.
Mhm.
As someone that has had innovation in my job title now for like 11 years, I hope it doesn't mean that we failed because otherwise I need to find a new career. Um, I think really we should always be talking about innovating. We should always be talking about modernizing. We should always be talking about transformation because I think to Jeanette's comment, like we're in a world now where like stuff is happening fast.
Mhm.
And I think we should always be in a space of thinking about how we can do things differently, how we can do things better, how we can make things easier and more user friendly and more equitable and more transparent and more authentic for all the people that we serve, our businesses, our residents, our communities. I think when I got into this work, a decade ago, no government really was thinking about innovation, and it felt really new. The fact that the city of Philadelphia was standing up an innovation team and we had a director of innovation and we were hiring innovation program managers, I think at that moment in time really sent a strong message about what we were trying to do and what we were trying to build. And I think in the public sector, that language, almost to what I was saying earlier about government owning its own narrative. I think having offices of innovation, offices of transformation, to what Dwayne was saying about having people on staff that are really full-time dedicated to things like change management, I still think sends a really powerful message to both internal and external stakeholders that this way of thinking is something that our government, this government, whatever it is, like feels really strongly about. And I think that's very important. Um, I would be willing to bet money that in 5 years, though, it's going to be a different word, right? Like, like my work now in the Office of Opportunity and Transformation.
Mhm.
It's very similar to my innovation work. I think a lot of us have transitioned into a world of transformation, knowing it's at its core, it's the same thing. So who knows what we'll be talking about in the next 5 years. And I will say my hope for if we were to have this conversation again, my hope is that the work of government transformation, innovation, modernization, insert whatever you want, is more embedded than how it is now. Though I hope that
Mhm.
that's really the shift that we start to see is that leading this work, driving this work is no longer attached, I think, quite so heavily to folks like me that have this word in our job title, or offices like the Office of Transformation and Opportunity that are really tasked with this, but that this way of thinking is much more embedded in public sector
Mhm.
culture. And so maybe we shift from innovation with a capital I into like, it's a thing, we're doing innovation, into innovation with a lowercase I that's like, we are just innovative because that's the right way to be.
Mhm. I love that. Dwayne, anything?
Yeah. So I agree with what Eliza said. Um, in 5 years, if any organization or municipality is talking about modernization, then yeah, they failed, right? Um, I think it should be, such where modernization should evolve to just this is just how we do business, right? It should just be, the core of what we do. So that, moves into the innovation space, like Eliza said, where it's just lowercase I. And you get down to the basics, innovations just change. It's just continuous improvement, continuous change. And you have to have the right people in place, to bring about that. And so it comes down to what does success look like, right? And so if we are looking to innovate or transform or modernize government, then the citizens will look at this through the lens of if I open my phone and I pull up any app, it just works, right? If I were to log into AI, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, it just works, right?
Mhm.
That's the expectation that they will have of government. It just needs to work, right? And so modernization is, I think, is getting this effort off the ground, but then do you have the horses to pull this and to get it across that finish line so that you can move out of this space?
Excellent. Matt, did you want to add anything or? Nope. Good. Perfect. All right. Um, Stephanie, from your experience, in both procurement and administration, what is the ideal relationship and how can both sides achieve it?
Sure. I think when it works best, it is a partnership, and definitely one where both sides see themselves working towards the same outcomes and not necessarily, working in separate lanes. So, I kind of talked about this earlier, but I think at its best, procurement isn't just a compliance function, and administration isn't just submitting requests and asking for things to be done. They're really working together to achieve common goals. So, in practical experience, and in my experience, where it has worked best is when procurement's brought in early and before the scope is written, before timelines are set, when we involve procurement at the strategy stage. And I feel the same way about, IT. I could be saying the same thing about
Yeah.
IT. I think we get clearer requirements, we get more realistic schedules, and honestly, fewer surprises later. And I think it also creates this shared understanding of risk and, what success is going to look like. Um, I think communication, transparency is really important when it's working well. Administration, right? We need transparency on what's happening, the process, lead times, knowing like what is going to be involved in that. And I think procurement similarly needs clarity on, like I mentioned before, like objectives and the urgency and the real world impact. This isn't just, some exercise, but really understanding like on the ground, what are the impacts when there are delays with the procurement. And so I think when both sides can really share that information openly and regularly, you can start to have a more just a better relationship amongst the two. And I think sort of getting to that point is making sure that there's alignment around not only the goals, but like, our mission. Like I think the most impactful thing in my experience, working in procurement or working with procurement agencies is like when buyers can really understand and see very tangibly like the thing that they are working on, like how that is supporting residents or frontline operations. I loved when there was opportunity for us to actually go out and see, go to the groundbreaking of the building the bid, that our public works team worked on, and like actually seeing that, or going out to an agency and seeing in real time the things that we were working on in procurement, seeing how that was actually happening. And I think it's also important for administrators. We're trying to get a lot of things done very rapidly, but I think we also have to understand that there are some guardrails, right? That procurement has to be responsible for. So I just think, the ideal relationship is really where, they're operating more, as one team, shared goals, lots of communication, early engagement. I think a great, I mean, as challenging as this time was, how we work together during COVID, I think is a really good example of, we had to talk constantly. We had to be at the table for all the conversations that were happening and how we were doing certain things and deploying certain things and, making sure that we were kind of staying into the guardrails, that were being required of us when we're using federal money during that time. So I think that was a good example of how I think it can work well. We saw that really effectively during that period, especially.
Absolutely. Dwayne, Eliza, do you want to add any final comments here? Words?
I think Stephanie did a great job of summing it up. I'll just leave with this for procurement is like how you buy determines what you can build.
Mhm.
So I think that procurement needs to be at the strategy table to be, a viable partner.
Absolutely. Eliza, do you want to add anything?
Nope, I have no notes.
All right. I see a lot of comments in the chat about procurement having that seat at the table, being a strategic partner. And yeah, couldn't agree more. So I think we'll skip the last question due to time because I know that we're at the top of the hour here. But want to thank the panel. We do have, if you want to test your maturity in your assessment, there's a bunch of questions in there about AI and being ready for the future. So I know Jeanette, I think, has put the link in the chat for anybody who's interested in getting their own assessment. But thank you very much to the panel. I think this is a fantastic chat. Something we'd love to repeat a year from now to see where we are, if things have changed, if they haven't. But again, thank you everybody for joining, and hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.